Hello, welcome to another edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace, reporting live here at the Baha'i Center here in New York City as part of the weekly Tuesday night jazz series. Tonight, making a very, very important appearance for his official CD record release performance is the legendary Mike Longo. In fact, his brand new CD celebrates the legacy of Oscar Peterson, the legendary pianist. And as you might know, Mike Longo is no stranger to the jazz scene. For well over 5 decades, this gentleman has backed the likes of Roy Eldridge to the great Dizzy Gillespie, and he was also taught by the legendary Oscar Peterson. He recorded this album live here a little over 2 years ago, and he plays a lot of Oscar Peterson's selections. We sat down earlier and we talked about really reflecting the life of Oscar Peterson. We talked about the reason why he's one of the most prolific and important jazz pianists, as well as we talk about Mike's background growing up in Florida. As you might know, he got his start with the great Cannonball Adderley, as well as for 28 years he played with the legendary Dizzy Gillespie. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the sounds of the Mike Longo Trio in tribute to the great Oscar Peterson, live here at the Baha'i Center here in New York City as part of the weekly Tuesday night jazz series here on the Pace Report here in New York City. You know, Mike, this CD is long overdue because you are paying tribute to one of the great deans of the 88 Keys, Mr. Oscar Peterson. First of all, there are layers to this story. You recorded the album live here at the High Center here, but also your history with Oscar goes back to the 60s.
Yeah, in 61, for 6 months. Intense.
You know, you tell the story about the record, the West Side Story album that he was about to record, and what were some of the things, one, that you noticed in his technique, and two, him as a showman, as a person communicating the language of jazz?
Well, he was a master at that, and he had Oscar, man, if he didn't get a standing ovation, he would be pounding the walls. Because he, for Oscar, every night was a heavyweight championship, and he played like that too. And so I remember his wife, she was a nurse, and she'd be giving him, what do you got, those vitamin B shots. But he was like, every night was the heavyweight championship for Oscar, you know. And he was a huge person in the sense he had a big heart, man, and for him to take time out of his career to teach us up there. He had this school called the Advanced School of Contemporary Music. He and Ray Brown started, and I met Oscar in Chicago during the summer. I went to Chicago to play with Jimmy McPartland at a place called Bourbon Street. And I went to this jam session and met this boxer named Connie Milano. And he was a bass player, but also a fighter, and he knew Oscar. He heard me play. He said, "Man, you got to meet Oscar Peterson." Oscar had been like an idol of mine, you know. Oscar was playing the London House, so I went over and I met him. And so he invited me to his hotel suite the next day, and he had a Wurlitzer electric piano, I remember, and he asked me to play for him. So I played something. He said, "How'd you like to study with me?" I said, "Oh, man." And so he told me he was going to be up there for that 6 months. So, man, and my dad did me a solid. He went up there with me and rented me an apartment, paid the rent for the whole 6 months. And I was living hand to mouth, actually, because he had me practicing 13 hours a day, Oscar. And so I was sustaining myself by, I played with this sort of club date band, and I had an after-hours gig at this jazz club called the House of Hamburg from 1 to 4 a.m. And so that's how I was living. The rest of the time, man, I was in the music. I'd be at the music building at 9 in the morning, practice till 12, go have lunch, come back at 1, practice till 6, have dinner, come back and practice till 11. Then I'd go over to my apartment. I had an electric piano in there, and all the cats from the school would come and hang out there, and we'd be transcribing solos off of records, and that's pretty much 7 days a week for that whole 6 months. That was what my life was.
You know, we got to paint a picture in the great annals of jazz. He hails from Montreal.
Correct.
And he was a great, great pianist, but two of his big influences, major influences, were, one, it was Art Tatum, and also Nat King Cole.
Correct.
Tell me when he decided and how he developed his own style, because there was a time he was trying to play like both of them.
Well, one of his main influences, he told me, was Dizzy Gillespie. And so I think that was what differentiated him from Art and Nat. And also Oscar started out, he was a boogie-woogie piano player. And then I think he got into Dizzy, and he took a turn and went in another direction from Art. Art was a great solo pianist, but when he played with a rhythm section, there was no place for anybody to play. He played so much piano. So Oscar had that down. He could play, and he and Ray Brown, man, when they hooked up, that was the all-time great piano and bass teams. And so Ray had a tremendous influence on Oscar in the direction he took.
You know, I want to hit on that, because the album you're playing with your trio, but these songs that you're doing, I mean, there's so many songs that were his, but 3 of them I noticed that are really like the landmark Oscar Peterson songs: Sweet Georgia Brown, Tenderly, and Work Song.
Yeah.
When did you start learning how to play those songs? And when did you incorporate those songs into your repertoire now?
Actually, when I was preparing for this concert. So I went back and I was listening, like what you just said, the signature tunes of his, and so then I practiced those tunes for the concert that was recorded on that CD. But I think I had been playing Tenderly for a while. I remember Oscar, he was a stickler for you. You couldn't play like anybody but yourself. He would not. When I left there, he told me, he said, Mike, he said, Art Tatum had a magnificent tone. You got to have a magnificent tone. Art had impeccable taste. You've got to have impeccable taste. Art had an exquisite technique, and he went on and on. He says, so man, when you leave here, don't you start playing like me.
When did the piano, growing up in Florida, when did you know this was going to take root in your life?
Well, it was when I heard Oscar, but I started playing at 3 years old in Cincinnati. They started me at the Cincinnati Conservatory when I was 4 with formal teachers. And then I was, I was playing boogie woogie back then. But I was into like playing baseball and all. I didn't really want to. And then I heard Oscar and I said, oh, that's what I'm going to do.
Oscar's trios and even the duos have been his claim to fame. In fact, he had guitar and bass for a while, and then after his last guitarist left, he started adding the drums.
Yeah.
What did that do for his trio?
Well, it put a different slant on it, but I mean, Oscar was Oscar, so I know he would put a hurting on drummers. Ray MOSCA was one of his drummers, and Ray used to tell, "Man, you better go to the gym and work out because this man will kill you." Because Oscar, man, he played with such intensity, and I mean, a deep pocket, and so. It wasn't easy playing with him, especially for a drummer, you know. And so I know Ed Thigpen, I think he was the first. And then I know Louis Hayes and also Bobby Durham. Like Ray said, you better go to the gym and work out, man. And Ray too, he was like that, man. He would dong dong dong. You better have your stuff together to play with them, you know.
You know, developing your piano style and studying and playing with the greats, how has Oscar Peterson contributed, along with greats like Dave Brubeck and Ahmad Jamal and Randy Weston? How have they contributed to the game of jazz as well as piano players?
Well, Oscar was the dean. I mean, I know Dizzy, he used to say he was number one. And all the other ones you mentioned used to look up to Oscar. You know, what he was the complete pianist. It was like an orchestra when he played. And in terms of jazz piano, he was a mover and shaker, because he carried the tradition forward, and he was complete. Like there's some great pianists that have wonderful right hands and not too much of a left hand. And then there's other guys that played like stride, and their right-hand lines weren't the most lyrical things in the world. But Oscar Peterson had the whole meal.
You know, I want to ask you some questions about Dizzy Gillespie. You performed in an auditorium dedicated to him, and you pretty much have carried on Dizzy's legacy, both music as well as in your faith. Tell me what he means to you and what he means to the world of jazz.
Dizzy was more than a genius. He was a messenger. He had a cosmic quality about him, and he revealed an organic change in music. And I have no idea where that came from. Well, I do know where it came from, but how he was able to do that is beyond me. And I had a 26-year relationship with him, 9 straight as his pianist, and then I played with him intermittently up till his death. And oftentimes I'd play just he and I over at his house when he'd be off if he wanted to keep his chops up. And it was a tremendous learning experience. The man was, there was 3 Dizzy Gillespies. There was the screwball that everybody knew, but then there was a very serious side musically. I mean, as soon as he put his horn up, you could see this deep, say, uh-oh. He was serious as a heart attack. Then there was the very spiritual man that became a Baha'i, and he and I both became Baha'is. Me 5 years after him, but he's still not appreciated. It's going to be a long time before people realize what he did. And a lot of musicians have not digested it yet. They've learned the notes, but they don't know what the concept was that created the notes.
Now, Mike, I find that strange and hard to digest because his compositions are just, they're endless. People are now playing his music now. And they're now playing his music with orchestras now.
Oh, yeah. Did you know Coleridge Taylor Perkinson?
Yeah.
He wrote a lot of stuff of Dizzy's for symphony. We used to tour around. We would be playing with the symphony orchestras. I have a funny story with Boston Pops. Boy, Dizzy was a funny dude, man. I think Pops with Fiedler and Mickey Roker and I and Dizzy, we used to play poker all the time. And so we showed up to the rehearsal in dashikis, and so Pops with Fiedler, I don't think he ever hung out with an African American person in his life. So Coleridge had written this big arrangement on Kush. I don't know if it was an African piece. And so there's a whole section in the middle where it's just Dizzy in the rhythm sections improvising. And I look over and Pops is trying to conduct us. And so he looks at me and he goes, "Watch me." And I say, "Kiss bye." His face turned. And then at the end, man, he went to shake Dizzy's hand, and Dizzy grabbed him and kissed him on the lips, and we walked out and split, went back to New York. But and Mickey kept calling, "Hey, Pops, Boston Pops, what's happening, man?" He didn't know what to make of that. He was a nice cat, but he was like, he was a cube. He wasn't even square. He was
That'll do it again for another edition of the Pace Report. Reporting live here at the John Burks Gillespie Auditorium here at the Baha'i Center here in New York City. I'd like to personally thank the legendary Mike Longo for his time. Also, I'd like to personally thank and commend the staff here at the Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the City of New York for their warm hospitality. As always, please visit my website, www.thepacereport.com, for my weekly column as well as my past segments. Till next time, remember, if it's in the groove, it'll make you move. Till next time, peace.